let's call a spade a spade. I mean, Donald Trump, when he announced this war in Iran, simply said that he talked to the Iranian people and said, take control of your government. Then 7 days later, he said, this is going to be over soon. I mean, he continuously comes out here and lies not only to our face, but to the world partners.
Did you think this was going to be over soon?
Because I know better. We know better.
Okay.
But not only that,
when he first came out, he said that this was going to be about regime change. Then they changed that messaging.
But now you're saying, and one of the things Michael just said is that the American people are going to have to just somehow get over this.
I genuinely think this exchange highlights one of the biggest disconnects in modern politics right now. When you surround an administration with wealthy billionaires and corporate figures who haven't lived the reality of ordinary people in decades, you end up with conversations that sound completely detached from what everyday Americans are actually dealing with. And in this clip, you're going to watch expose that disconnect in real time with one straightforward question directed at. Watch this full discussion carefully because the contrast between the arguments being made is honestly pretty revealing. Once the clip is over, I'll come back and give you my full thoughts on everything that stood out to me. Please subscribe, like, and share if you enjoy political breakdowns and discussions like this.
Good evening. I'm Abby Phillip in New York. Tonight, a renewed push toward peace. In the next 24 hours or so, Iran is expected to respond to the United States' proposal to end the war. Now, both sides are reportedly moving closer to an agreement on a memo that would end the conflict for 30 days so that they can hash out 3 key sticking points that include Iran's nuclear issues, unfreezing Iranian assets, and future security in the Strait of Hormuz. A source tells CNN that the plan would include a discussion of a moratorium on Iran's enriched uranium for longer than 10 years, and it would require Iran to ship its highly enriched uranium out of the country. Today, President Trump warned that if Iran doesn't agree to this, the United States will begin bombing at a higher level and intensity than before. But later, he expressed optimism about a potential deal.
We've had very good talks over the last 24 hours, and it's very possible that we'll make a deal. We've had some good talks before, as you know, right. And all of a sudden the next day they're like, they forgot what happened.
So one-page memorandum that basically buys 30 more days to talk to the Iranians. Scott, why are we in this constant pause to talk, to pause to talk, to pause to talk cycle with Iran?
Well, a few things. One, I think Trump does want to end the war. I think he knows we've destroyed basically all the military targets, and so what's left is to negotiate the outcome that he wants, which is no nuclear weapons. So that's number one. Number two, he's got this summit with the Chinese coming up next week. This is an important moment, and in fact, today, the Chinese foreign minister, I guess, had the Iranian foreign minister in Beijing. I assume there's some discussions going on with China to bring their pressure to bear before the president gets over there to talk to the Chinese. So that's the second issue. And then the third issue is, I think he's trying to make a deal here, but it's not clear maybe internally who we're making a deal with. It's a little bit divided right now.
Yeah.
On the what they're trying to do, if we get what they say on the nuclear piece, no pursuit of nuclear weapons, I think that's terrific. The one thing that's not been talked about in the memorandum that I'm interested in is whether we're going to make a deal with them on not pursuing any missile program, because the missiles is what's terrorizing everybody in the Middle East. They apparently possess some missiles that could reach most of Europe. That's a non-starter as well. But the nuclear piece is obviously number one.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of missing pieces. I mean, it's a one-page memorandum, so clearly it's not going to address all the issues. It doesn't address their support for proxies. It doesn't address, to Scott's point, their missile program. It also has a timeline, say that according to our reporting, is longer than 10 years. There's been previous reporting that maybe it was 20 years, but the Iran nuclear deal was 15 years. So we're kind of in the same ballgame that we were in before, except that now Iran is way closer to a nuclear weapon than they were during the JCPOA.
The problem is, colloquially, we say that Trump is hustling backwards. I mean, that's what they're doing. That's what this administration is doing. They're selling us a bill of goods. I mean, I don't think anyone around the table, people watching, there's no one out there that says that Iran deserves a nuclear weapon. So let's start with that preface. Let's literally start there to take that argument off the table. But what we are doing is saying, one, we're still giving Iran resources. Two, the Strait of Hormuz wasn't closed before we entered this war. Three, we entered this war without a strategy to get out. We've already lost military members, which is 4. We've lost men and women who were battling and wearing our shield on their vest. And 5, even more importantly, even today, as we inch closer to what they perceive to be a deal, we are still echoing the same thing that the JCPOA did. And actually, I would argue that the JCPOA actually made sure that Iran was further away from a nuclear weapon than they are today, and they will be under whatever Donald Trump agrees to. We are the definition of hustling backwards, and that is the tragedy.
The Strait of Hormuz is still closed. And actually, today, Iran released this website that says, "Welcome to the Persian Gulf Strait Authority." They are asserting control over the strait. They're setting up an entity that would allow them to do things like collect tolls, to manage the inflows and outflows. I mean, this is a different world than we were in before, and that can have profound impacts on the global economy.
It's just social media. It's irrelevant. And the way I look at it and why this outcome probably is going to work out is the alignment in the Middle East has changed forever. There was a time only 70 days ago when the countries around Iran would not take issue with them, considering them to be in the circle of friendship, so to speak. They showed their colors by bombing all their neighbors. They weren't successful, but they caused a lot of economic damage, data centers, oil refineries. Those countries, UAE specifically, which took so much of the brunt because it's so close to the U.S., are forever aligned with the United States now, period. So whatever deal is going to happen, it's going to be with an understanding that odd man out in perpetuity is this rogue country where you've got a militia of 250,000 people. You've got to pay them to kill people, so you can't cut off their oil forever. And right now, every day they lose $210 million. So there's two ways to tenderize Iran. Shut down the strait so they can't get their oil out, squeeze their cash so they can't pay the murderers that are in there. Because remember, there's 92 million people, good people. There's a million army controlled by 250,000 paid thug murderers, militia. That's how it works. Now, you cut off that money, the thugs don't get paid. They don't kill anybody anymore. Then maybe you can get a change. But whatever happens from this point on,
be in a different place, though,
it's just the way it is.
Because,
that's a fact.
I think that your presentation of it sounds nice and straightforward, but the reality is, well, the reality is that we're dealing with an ideological regime, and we're dealing with an ideological regime that's controlled by the people with the guns, and those people, despite all the economic pressure, contrary to what you are saying, have not backed down. That's why we're in this predicament, because Trump is talking to some people, but the guys with the guns keep saying no deal.
Listen, I genuinely want the United States to succeed. I don't want us to have gone through all of this hell for the last few months to end up in a worse place than where Obama had left us. And I want it to be over quickly. I consume an inordinate amount of news on a daily basis. I can't keep up with what's going on because I feel like you wake up in the morning, you read something in the newspaper, then by mid-morning, the White House spokesperson or Hegseth or Rubio have come out and said this thing is over. 2 hours later, Trump is tweeting the opposite. And then in the middle of the night, he'll wake up and he'll tweet out some sort of meme that makes absolutely no sense. In the meantime, you've got the Iranians giving him playing from the same hymnal, doing memes of Legos and tweeting things out on social media. I feel like I have heard, I don't know how many times now, in the last, 2.5, 3 months, that this war is almost over, that we are close to a deal. I hope we are close to a deal, but at this point, until I see that deal, I don't know what we're talking about.
President Trump let me just play what he said today about how this blockade, this naval blockade, has been working.
We're dealing with people that want to make a deal very much, and we'll see whether or not they can make a deal that's satisfactory to us. We have it very much under control. The blockade is unbelievable. The Navy's been incredible. The job they did is like a wall of steel.
He keeps saying that it's very much under control, but it's not. There's no traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. And in fact, yesterday, they were going to escort ships, and then they abandoned that plan after regional partners, including Pakistan and other regional countries, said, let's stop doing this because they were coming under fire from Iran.
Yeah, sure. Look, this is complicated. The JCPOA took 20 months, almost 2 years, of intense negotiations back and forth. 6 months in, they thought they were close, and then it took another 6 months. They thought they were close, and it took almost 2 years. And so I think sometimes this is complicated stuff. I know there are different positions about whether or not the conflict should have even started. People can argue that. But I think at this point, we can't look backwards. And so I think the American people just have to understand that this is going to take time. This is not going to happen overnight.
But that's also
well, the 30-day memorandum is to stop the ceasefires for 30 days.
In order to
but the actual negotiations themselves aren't going to occur in 30 days.
Yeah, but it also buys him time not to have to go in front of Congress.
But also,
putting a timeline on it doesn't make any sense because, to your point, it could take.
Well, it could take a year and a half.
But Donald Trump also lied. Let's call a spade a spade. I mean, Donald Trump, when he announced this war in Iran, simply said that he talked to the Iranian people and said, take control of your government. Then 7 days later, he said, this is going to be over soon. I mean, he continuously comes out here and lies not only to our face, but to the world partners.
Did you think this was going to be over soon?
Because I know better. We know better.
Okay.
But not only that,
when he first came out, he said that this was going to be about regime change. Then they changed that messaging.
But now you're saying, and one of the things Shermichael just said is that the American people are going to have to just somehow get over this.
No, that's no. I said they have to understand the complexity of this. This is not going to happen in 30 days.
Correct.
This takes a lot of time.
The difference between that assertion and the JCPOA is that during the JCPOA negotiations, you weren't having farmers in the middle of America struggling to afford fertilizer. You weren't having airlines that were having to go under because of the rising costs of fuel.
Well,
you weren't having people.
Spirit was more complicated.
Well, don't worry,
JetBlue
is coming.
Make a profit
JetBlue is coming. Don't worry about that.
Come on.
But you also weren't having people having $5 and $6 a gallon at the pump. See, that is the difference between the JCPOA and what we're doing right now.
That doesn't change the fact that this is not going to happen in 1 month.
Well, I guess
that's my point.
Thank you for telling the truth.
I'm with you.
I agree.
I think you're totally right about that. But the
I
problem is that the president is not sending that message to the American people. Every day he wakes up and he's like, we're almost getting a deal. And if you believe that, which I think at this point you should know better, but if you do believe that, then I think you will be surprised when it probably doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in 48 hours or 72 hours or 10 days or whatever timeline he has decided to put on it.
Yeah, I don't know when it's going to end. I don't know when they're going to come to their senses. I mean, look, eventually the president's going to have to decide what the timeline is on his patience. I think he's showing some restraint right now and some patience with them. I mean, they have kind of violated the ceasefire. They've sent these little boats out and they've fired on our partners in the Middle East. The president has showed restraint because I think he believes in the diplomatic process that's going on. I agree with Shermichael. It may take some time.
Should he level with the American people about truly how long this could take? And if it does take a long time, how long we could be living with a global economy that's being held hostage by Iran?
I mean, the truth is he probably doesn't know, A, because we're dealing with a fractured government, and B, we're dealing with folks here who, let's be honest, aren't the best faith operators. And so I think, look, however this ends and whenever it ends, one thing has to be true. Complete and total victory, which comes in the form of saying they will never have a nuclear weapon. Whenever he gets to that point, then it will be a success.
Does never mean a 10-year timeline.
If it's 10 years or 15 years for you, that's not complete victory?
Well, what I read today was that there would be a moratorium of maybe 15 years, and that the Iranians would also agree to send their 970 pounds of enriched uranium to the United States, and that they would promise to not pursue any weaponization. If those three things happen, that's victory.
But I would just say quickly, Abby, to your point about the rise in oil prices, you talked about this, Bakari. I mean, a part of having a 30-day ceasefire is in those negotiations, you're going to, I assume, argue for them to open up the Strait of Hormuz, because it is going to take at least 90 days. Maybe even longer to see oil prices begin to drop again. And so that has to be a part of that negotiations until you get to an ultimate
Why was that not? Can somebody explain to me, like I'm a fifth grader, like why was the shutting off of the Strait of Hormuz not actually something that Pete Hegseth and the rest of them thought about prior to?
Am I supposed to know?
I'm just asking. Explain it to me, please.
Because the Strait of Hormuz is how Iran gets income.
We know that part.
So
but his question,
my question is, why did we not anticipate them shutting it off? Like, if you're going to war with somebody...
We didn't. I have no idea. The strategy was to go in there and change the dynamics in perpetuity. No question. After
so we didn't know what the hell we were doing.
I guarantee you two things. Before this is worked out, the Strait will be open and probably policed by people around that region because it's in their best interest. And secondly, There are no friends in the world left for Iran. Maybe you could call China in.
Yeah, China.
Maybe you could call Russia. But these are rogue nations. And what Trump has done, whether you like it or you don't, he's changed the axis of power there. Because at the end of the day, this is good for that region. That region has such potential and growth, and you could see it in Dubai.
Explain to me what's good right now. Explain to me right now as we sit here what's good for the American public.
We want to do business in growing jurisdictions. We want to sell stuff to people where their economies are growing. That's
You just said a bunch of nothing.
Years.
Like, explain to me right now, somebody who lives in South Carolina, Nebraska, Ohio, what is good right now for the American public going into a war where you do not understand that they're going to close the Strait of Hormuz? Explain to somebody watching right now where they're from.
This war is 78 days
So you
old.
don't have an answer. Just say
I have
don't
a
an
100% answer.
What's the
you
answer?
make stuff in North Carolina, you make stuff in South Carolina, you have to sell it to somebody. You want to ship it to countries where they can afford it, where they make a lot of money, where the income per capita is very high. That's what the Middle East has.
You can't sell me a bunch of BS.
Can I tell you something?
There's no BS here.
But the farmer in North Carolina who was not able to secure fertilizer for their planting crops right now is not going to have a short-term answer.
They won't have to
Is not
solve
going to
that
be able
problem in
to solve-
24 hours? You just take the tariff off potash.
You raised a good topic, which is short-term versus long-term. And I grant you, there will be people who look at this as a short-term, painful experience. What the president has said, though, is, look, I just cannot permit, after all these years, after 47 years of these people being at war with us and Western civilization, I cannot permit them to get to a place where they have a nuclear weapon. And over the long term, our children and our grandchildren will thank us when we take that away from them. So it is a good debating topic, short versus long term. The president here has a long-term thought, which is he can't let these people
Scott, there's such a huge
We gotta
number of
leave it there.
farmers declaring bankruptcy right now. And if I were a farmer in America, I'd be asking myself, why the hell did we send $40 billion to bail out Argentina and
That was
nobody's
a credit
helping us
swap when we
out?
made money on it.
Sure, Michael, you were
Look, I was just going to say
Explain that
quickly,
to the farmers.
Bakari is raising a very legitimate question about the immediate versus the long term. I mean, in terms of immediate, I don't have an answer that will be satisfactory to most people who are struggling out there. To me, in the long run, I'm looking at stabilization in the region. I'm also looking at China, which has been a big focal point for me. They get 14% of their oil reserves from Iran. They are our #1 adversary globally. I think any opportunity the United States can diminish that is critically important for our hegemony over the next 50 to 100 years. That's a long-term answer, but a very valid one.
All right. Well, the thing I'm looking for is, can they actually get a deal? Because at
Hope
the end of
so.
the day, Iran's big play has been for many decades just to keep talking. And they'd love to just keep talking until the cows come home. But will they actually sign on the dotted line is the big question for this White House. Next for us, a White House.
One of the biggest things that stood out to me in that discussion is just how much the messaging around this Iran conflict keeps changing depending on the moment. During the campaign, the promise was no new wars and no prolonged foreign conflicts. Yet now you have people openly defending timelines that could stretch years into the future, as long as they believe the outcome justifies it. And that shift alone explains why so many Americans are confused about what the actual strategy is supposed to be. I also think the comparison to the JCPOA is unavoidable at this point. A lot of the goals being discussed now sound remarkably similar to the same framework that already existed years ago. That's what makes this conversation frustrating for many people watching. If negotiations, uranium limits, and long-term monitoring were always going to be part of the solution anyway, then naturally people are going to ask why the original agreement was abandoned in the first place. Especially when multiple international reports at the time stated that Iran was still following large parts of the deal. And honestly, I think Bakari Sellers made the strongest point of the entire exchange when he brought the conversation back to ordinary Americans. Instead of speaking in broad geopolitical theories, he asked a very simple question. What does any of this mean for people struggling right now with rising fuel costs, business pressure, and economic uncertainty? That's the part of these debates that often gets lost whenever billionaires and political strategists start discussing long-term outcomes, while average families are focused on surviving month to month. At the end of the day, viewers can agree or disagree on foreign policy, but people still expect clear answers, consistency, and honesty about the real costs involved. And when those answers keep shifting, it naturally creates more skepticism and frustration. But those are just my thoughts on the exchange. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, share it around, and comment where you're watching from. See you guys.